when Marianne brought home a battered shelter cat. She only wanted quiet company in her small Maple Street rental. Then her grandson moved in. A toddler in striped pajamas with mysterious bruises on his legs, and the cat simply would not leave his side. On a stormy night, with the house shaking and the boy burning with fever, that strange loyalty finally revealed what it had sensed and seen all along. By late October, the little rental on Maple Street should have felt lived in. Lamps cast soft circles over the worn brown couch. The clock hummed on the wall, and a toddler's soft breathing drifted from the back bedroom. Marianne stacked dishes in the rack and told herself this was what Shed wanted. Company again. Small footsteps in the hallway. Yet every evening, as the light thinned, the house felt like it was waiting on one more heartbeat. The first odd thing showed up by the front door. Marianne kept her boots lined up like old habits from the post office. Toes all squared with the mat. One night she found a single boot nudged sideways, turned toward the hallway as if someone had paused there. She frowned, straightened it, and noticed a couple of pale hairs clinging to the leather before drifting off on the warm air from the vent. Just before dawn, a small sound began visiting the edges of sleep. It wasn't the refrigerator cycling or the heater clicking on. It was a soft drop, then a faint scuff, like something light landing on carpet and shifting its weight. Marianne would open her eyes to the grey ceiling and listen, heart climbing higher than the noise deserved, until Owen sighed in his crib and pulled her attention back to him. By breakfast, the sound became easy to excuse. On the sliding glass door that faced the narrow backyard, a foggy circle appeared at knee height. She figured Owen had leaned there with sticky hands, but the mark was too round, too low, with a clearer streak in the centre like a pressed nose. She wiped it clean. The next evening, there it was again, a little higher, as though something on the other side kept testing where the world turned solid and cold. The brown couch carried its own secret. Each night, before she turned off the lamps, Marianne smoothed the throw blanket until the cushion lay flat. Every morning, a shallow hollow dented the same place, beside the spot where her grandson liked to sit with his truck. When she placed her hand there, the fabric seemed to hold a little warmth, as if some patient weight had just risen and stepped away before the kettle whistled. Other moments brushed past her like drafts. Carrying laundry down the hall, Shed feel the lightest touch against her shin, as if she had nearly stepped on something that moved just in time. She would stop and look back. The worn rug, the baseboard heater, the half-closed nursery door met her eyes. Nothing more. Still, the fine hairs on her arms would stand up for a breath before she shook it off and kept going. The day her daughter and Owen moved in for good, she changed the crib sheets and found a soft tangle of pale threads caught in one corner. Not lint from the dryer, not fuzz from a toy longer, smoother, clinging to the cotton. She shook them into the trash, and a faint warm scent lifted for a heartbeat, wild under the sharpness of detergent. It vanished almost as soon as she noticed, leaving only the steady thump of tiny feet exploring the hall. That evening, as dusk settled over Maple Street, the phone rang with an unfamiliar number from the county shelter. A woman's voice asked if Marianne was still open to taking in an older tabby fellow who needed somewhere quiet. Marianne listened, looking at the hollow in the couch and the smudge on the glass. When she hung up, agreement made. The house felt different, not less restless, but as if whatever had been waiting had finally heard its name spoken out loud. He came home in a plastic carrier that creaked with each careful step. Marianne set it down in the living room, heart tapping in time with her grandson's excited whispers. The door latch clicked, and a broad, striped head pushed through, followed by a sturdy body carried low, as if he was ready to spring away if kindness turned sharp. One ear bore an old notch, and his coat was thick, the colour of weathered straw and storm clouds. He did not rush. He stepped out, sniffed the air, and moved in a slow circle, passing the cracked coffee table, the toy truck on the rug, the crooked family photo on the wall. Then, without hesitation, he padded to the worn brown couch, gathered himself, and jumped up. Turning once, he lay down in the exact hollow that had been waiting for him, released a long breath, and closed his eyes like a traveller finally off the road. Owen squealed and toddled closer, striped pajamas almost matching the newcomer's back. The animal opened one eye, watched the small boy sway on unsteady legs, and lifted his head. Instead of swiping or flinching, he slid forward until his side pressed firmly against the child's shins. His whiskers brushed a faint mark above the sock, and for a second his gaze sharpened, as if something there did not match what his nose expected. In the days that followed, Marianne told herself he was only settling in. He padded along the baseboards like a quiet inspector, pausing at door frames, corners, and the sliding glass door where his own nose print joined the old smudge. At night, the indistinct dawn noise turned clear. A jump from couch to floor. A soft landing near Owen's door. Then silence as he stretched along the threshold like a striped draft stopper with a job. Patterns formed whether anyone wanted them or not. Each afternoon, when sunlight slipped in through the blinds, Owen would wander into the living room dragging his truck. Almost on cue, the newcomer appeared from wherever he had been dozing, hopped onto the couch, and arranged himself along the boy's legs, his body wrapped there like a careful brace, eyes half closed, but ears tuned to the clatter of plastic wheels and the creak of the loose floorboard by the table. He thinks Owen's his littermate. Marianne's daughter joked one evening, dropping her bag by the door. Her smile faded a little when she saw how closely the striped body hugged the bruised skin of her son's shins. We should watch that, though. If he starts scratching, her voice trailed off. Worry and pride pulling in opposite directions as the animal flicked one ear and stayed exactly where he was. Marianne tried to tempt him away. She shook the treat bag in the kitchen, patted a folded blanket on the armchair, even left a cardboard box in the sunbeam by the window. He accepted the treats, sniffed the blanket, inspected the box, then returned to his chosen station. Wherever Owen settled on the floor, on the couch, by the hall, the striped watcher adjusted, nose hovering near those mottled little legs with tireless focus. Late one evening, when the house had gone soft and quiet, Marianne sat in her chair and watched him. Owen slept, half sprawled, half curled, a small hand resting on the thick fur by his ankle. The animal lay pressed against those thin shins, eyes open, staring past the room towards some line only he could see. The man telling this story might say it simple. Something in that boy's skin had called to him, and he had answered by moving in. The shelter file said he'd been trapped near the feed store on the edge of town, raiding dumpsters for weeks. Beyond that, the paper trail ended. His real history lived in the way he moved, in the layered muscle under his coat, in the thin, white lines of old scars. A man's voice can only imagine. Snow stacked against barn doors, cold seeping up through old planks, hunger teaching him which shadows meant danger and which meant a dropped crust of bread. Some evenings, Marianne caught him at the front window, sitting very still. The street lamps painted his reflection over the dark. A freight train called across town, or a siren rose and fell on the highway, and the nicked ear flicked. Just once. His shoulders tightened and eased on each sound, like someone who had learned to measure how bad the night might get from the noises that reached him through thin walls and broken glass. In her mind, she built a younger version of him, smaller, thinner, slipping between hay bales in some distant barn, praised for the empty feed sacks he left behind. Maybe children there had dragged their blankets to the loft and fallen asleep with an arm around his warm body. Maybe one winter the door stopped opening. Voices faded, and the warm hay smell was replaced by exhaust and asphalt as he followed garbage routes down into town. Trust breaks in ways that don't always show. The first time Marianne tried to adjust his new collar, her fingers slipping under his chin. His whole body flinched like a pulled wire. No sound, no claws, just every muscle tightening in a flash. He caught himself. leaned back into her hand with a low rumble, but her breath stayed lodged higher than it should. Whatever hands had touched him before had not always been gentle. The lesson sat under his skin still. People in town carried their own stories about strays, most of them unkind. Mrs. Palmer complained about overturned lids and paw prints on her car. Their trouble. Marianne, she said more than once over the fence. They take what they can and leave you to clean up the mess. Better not let that one think he belongs. Marianne listened, watching the striped sleeper on her rug, remembering the index of bones shed felt under that coat when she first brought him home. Her own losses made her cautious. After her husband died, Shed cleared his workbench in a single, brutal afternoon because she couldn't stand the ache of untouched tools. When her daughter arrived with a suitcase and a tired little boy, Marianne kept herself busy in the kitchen, acting like host instead of family, loving people. She had learned. Meant one day standing at a bed or a graveside while someone you needed did not answer back. The new arrival seemed to understand distance. He accepted food and a warm corner, but rarely chose her lap unless Owen was there too. He slept near, not on, her feet. He took the offered toys with polite curiosity, then ignored them in favour of pacing slow circuits between the couch and the hall. The only thing he fully committed to was that uneven pattern of bruises blooming along a toddler's shins. It left Marianne with a strange ache she couldn't name. She wanted him to curl against her side, to choose her chair as his own, to anchor her evenings the way he anchored Owen. Instead, she found herself watching from across the room as a battered wanderer and a fragile little boy rested their weight against each other. Somewhere in the quiet space between them, a promise had been made, and she was only just beginning to understand she wasn't the one it had been offered to. The day the pattern turned into a warning, rain stitched steady lines across the windows. The house smelled of tomato soup and damp socks. Owen shuffled into the room. Striped pajamas rumpled from his nap. Toy truck dragging a crooked path along the rug. From under the dining table, the striped watcher slid out and fell into step beside him, matching his slow, wobbly pace so closely that their legs brushed with every second step. The boy veered toward the coffee table, his favourite racetrack, its corner already familiar with his knees. Before he could climb, the striped body surged ahead and hopped up, planting himself squarely in the centre. He sat tall, tail wrapped tight, eyes fixed on the child with a seriousness that made Marianne pause halfway to a chuckle. When Owen tried to push his truck along the edge, her broad paw gently nudged it back toward the safer softness of the couch cushion. "Let him play, buddy," Marianne said. Moving closer, she reached to lift the heavy body down. He leaned into the wood, muscles turning to stone under her hands. His gaze flicked to her once, steady and unafraid, then returned to Owen. Slowly, deliberately, he bent and touched his nose to the skin just above the boy's sock, where yellowing patches tangled with fresh purple, a scattered field of marks she had explained away one by one. That night, after stories and baths and medicine, Marianne nearly tripped in the hall. The striped watcher had stretched his full length across Owen's doorway, head pointed toward the hall, back paws still inside the room. Anyone going in or out would have to step over him. In the low glow of the nightlight, his eyes caught hers. He did not move. Behind him, her grandson's breathing hitched and resumed, uneven enough to make her own breath follow its stumbles. She slid down with her back to the wall, sitting on the worn rug. "What are you doing out here?" she whispered, reaching to stroke his side. Under her palm, his muscles tensed, then softened, one long breath leaving him as he turned his head just enough to glance back at the crib. He did not close his eyes. To the man telling this story, it looked like a line drawn at that doorway, a quiet statement that nothing crossed without first stepping over his watchful body. Morning brought no relief. Owen woke pale, with half moons under his eyes, but he insisted on shuffling toward the kitchen. The striped guardian walked pressed against those bruised legs, as if worried they might give out. Marianne's daughter hurried in, late and distracted, and frowned at what she saw. "Hez going to trip him," she said, nudging the striped side away with her foot. The animal yielded a step, then circled and wedged himself between child and cabinet corner again. By late afternoon, the same dance had replayed itself so many times that Marianne could feel her patience thinning around her fear. Owen clambered onto the brown couch and sagged against the cushion, toy truck slipping from his fingers. The striped watcher followed, not choosing the open space by the boy's shoulder, but the narrow strip along his shins. His body formed a living guardrail. Eyes, not on the television but on the faded and fresh marks laddering the child's skin. Sitting in her chair, Marianne finally stopped excusing what she saw. The hollows on the couch, the nose prints on glass, the nights spent in doorways, the stubborn blocks at every sharp edge, none of it was random. Whatever his history had carved into him, it had left behind a relentless instinct to stand between danger and those who could not stand for themselves. And, as those strange bruises spread, he seemed more certain than anyone in the room that danger was already inside the house. As the short days stacked up, the bruises became a kind of map only the striped watcher refused to look away from. Light marks turned dark. New ones bloomed in places no table or toy could explain. One afternoon, Marianne sat on the couch with Owen's legs across her lap. She traced the outlines in the air, not quite touching. The striped body pressed into those small shins, breath warm through the thin fabric, eyes flicking from one patch of discoloration to the next, as if counting enemy positions. On the phone, her daughter's voice carried more strain than she wanted to admit. He falls at daycare. They send pictures. He's always running. Kids bruise. Mom, please don't make this into something it's not. Marianne looked at the boy drooping against the cushion, at the way he leaned into the stripes beside him like they were holding him upright. The words something it's not rang hollow against what her eyes and that old survivor's body both seemed to know. Other people noticed. 2. At daycare pickup, another grandmother's gaze slid down to the mottled shins and lingered. Busy little fella, she said lightly, but the question in her eyes was louder. A day later, Mrs. Palmer knocked, casserole crooked in her hands. I don't mean to pry, she began, which meant she absolutely did. But I've seen those marks. Sometimes animals are rough. Sometimes people are. You might want to be careful who you let close. Her glance flicked pointedly toward the striped figure in the hallway. After she left, the house felt smaller. The broken toy truck lay tipped near the coffee table. Its front wheel snapped and rolled under the edge from some hard, forgotten crash. The striped watcher padded over, sniffed it once, then stepped deliberately between that jagged plastic and the spot where Owen now climbed onto the couch. He jumped up beside the boy, pressing against his leg as if to remind everyone that however the bruises had come, he wouldn't let another be added on his watch. That night, in the kitchen's harsh overhead light, Marianne's daughter paced. People already think I'm failing him, she said, words spilling faster than her breath. If they see those marks and that animal all over him, what are they going to say? What if he is making it worse? Jumping on him, knocking him down. The striped guardian sat in the doorway, tail wrapped neatly, eyes moving from her tight hands to the dark hall where Owen slept. His stillness felt like a quiet refusal to be made the easy villain. A visit to the clinic brought a thin comfort that dissolved quickly. The young doctor glanced at the bruises, checked ears and throat, and shrugged. Some little ones bruise easy, especially if they're active, he said. Hare's eating. He's growing. Keep an eye out. But I wouldn't worry yet. Marianne nodded because the room was small and her old habit of not making trouble was strong. On the drive home, though, she thought of who had actually been keeping an eye out, night after night, without being asked. That evening, heavy clouds stacked over Maple Street, flattening the late light. Owen moved slowly, as if the air had turned to syrup. He climbed onto the brown couch, toy truck slipping from his fingers and landing with a dull clack on the floor. The striped watcher followed, fur slightly raised, ear notch catching the lamplight. He laid himself along those bruised legs again, nose hovering over a new, dark stain under the skin that seemed to be spreading in a way no bump ever had. Thunder rolled, and the loose family photo on the wall rattled, tilting further off centre. Owen flinched, hands flying to his ears, eyes wide and glassy. The striped body did not jump or flee. He pressed closer, head butting gently into the boy's hip, chest rising fast as he drew in the scent of fever and something sweet metallic beneath it. Marianne watched from her chair, mug cooling in her grip, and finally let the whisper in her chest become a full sentence. This is not right, and pretending it is won't keep him safe. By the time the storm moved on, the house felt hushed in a different way. Owen lay on the brown couch in his striped pajamas, cheeks too bright, eyes ringed with grey shadows that didn't belong on a child's face. The toy truck stayed where it had fallen, wheel glinting from beneath the table. Along his legs, the striped watcher had arranged himself like a second blanket, fur ruffled, muscles tight, nicked ear angled toward the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. Come on, give him some space, Marianne's daughter said from the doorway, her figure blurred by the hall light. She took a step into the room. The striped body's eyes snapped to her, not angry, but burning with a focus that stopped her mid-stride. Instead of sliding away, he pushed himself harder into Owen's shins, paws braced, making it crystal clear that if she wanted to pick her son up, she would have to go through him first. Marianne knelt by the couch, her joints complaining. She rolled one little sock down and stared. A fresh bruise bloomed along the ankle, edges almost black, spreading in an irregular pattern that looked less like an impact and more like spilled ink under thin paper. The skin felt hot under her fingertips, heat pulsing up, not fading as a normal bump would. Owen whimpered and turned his face into the thick fur, fingers curling so tight that the stripes rippled under his grip. Hez burning up, Marianne said, her voice gone thin. Feel him. Her daughter leaned in, hand brushing her boy's forehead, then his chest. The colour drained from her cheeks as quickly as it had bloomed on his. For a heartbeat they both stood frozen, balanced between the comfortable lie and the frightening truth. The striped watcher broke the stillness with a low, urgent sound deep in his chest, eyes dropping again to the mottled landscape along those small legs. In that moment, the scattered clues crashed together. Restless nights, the hollow in the couch, the doorways guarded, the blocks at every sharp edge, the way he had glued himself to those shins as if they were the centre of the world. He hadn't been clingy or jealous. He had been sounding an alarm in the only language he had, refusing to leave the one place where the danger showed, until the humans around him finally admitted they heard it. "We're going," Marianne said, already reaching for her keys. There was no argument left in her voice. Her daughter wrapped Owen in a blanket, lifting him carefully, and the striped body tried to follow, front paws scrambling at her legs as if to insist he come too. At the door, when the screens swung between them and the rain-damp night, he paced tight circles, then let out one sharp, breaking cry that followed them all the way down the walk. Under the hospital's hard lights, the bruises looked even worse. Nurses took one look and moved fast. Blood was drawn. Monitors blinked to life. Quiet, firm voices traded numbers and terms. Words like platelets, clotting disorder, and dangerous, if untreated, cut through the fog in Marianne's head. One doctor, older, eyes steady, told them plainly that whatever was happening inside this little body had been building for a while, and they were fortunate not to have waited any longer. Hours later, as medicine dripped slowly into a small arm, a nurse asked what had finally pushed them to come in after another doctor had said not to worry. Marianne thought of her own instinct, of the shrug shed accepted days before, and then of the striped body welded to Owen's bruised legs on the couch. He wouldn't leave him alone, she said quietly. Our shelter stray. He stayed on his legs like he was guarding something we couldn't see. The story spread along the ward faster than the test results. Staff peeked in to smile at Owen and shake their heads at the idea of an unwanted animal catching what trained eyes had missed. One paediatrician chuckled softly and told them to give that fellow an extra treat. The man telling this story would let the truth land gently here. On Maple Street, it wasn't a white coat or a chart that first refused to ignore the bruise-coloured map of a rare, dangerous illness. It was a scarred old stray who simply wouldn't move. In the weeks that followed, life rearranged itself around new routines. There were follow-up visits, careful doses of medicine, blood draws that slowly began to bring numbers into safer ranges. The long name of Owen's rare disorder became something the family could say without flinching. Through every appointment, every waiting room, Marianne felt the weight of what might have happened if no one had answered that shelter call. If one striped back hadn't decided that a pair of small legs were his responsibility. At home, the changes were simple but sure. The coffee table left the living room one Saturday. Yard sale, bound. You win, Marianne's daughter told the striped watcher as they carried it out. In its place, a soft rug spread open space where hard edges had been. The striped body often chose that spot, stretched long, as if occupying the old danger on purpose. Corners got padded, floors cushioned, but everyone knew their true safety checks still wore stripes and an old nicked ear. Neighbours drifted back with casseroles and awkward apologies. Mrs. Palmer stood on the porch, looking from Owen's still faded but improving legs to the animal lounging nearby. They said at church he spotted it before anyone, she admitted. Voice low. I shouldn't have spoken the way I did. Marianne rested a hand on the broad back. I didn't listen to him soon enough either, she said. We both know better now. The striped watcher blinked once. Slow, as if dismissing the matter, returning to his post. New patterns settled over Maple Street. On stronger mornings, Owen walked slowly down the sidewalk, one hand in Marianne's, the other clutching his toy truck. The striped guardian padded along the top of the low fence or trotted at their side. At the uneven corner where the pavement dipped, he always jumped down first, standing in the path until the boy stepped safely past. Passing cars sometimes slowed, heads turning to watch the odd little procession of grandmother, child, and determined, battered guardian. Inside, the house's sounds took on gentler meanings. The soft thump from couch to floor no longer raised Marianne's heart rate. It signalled the start of another hallway patrol. The scuff of claws on the rug outside Owen's door became a kind of lullaby. If the boy whimpered in a half-dream, the striped body shifted first, curling closer against his legs, long before a sleepy adult came down the hall. The man reading this could almost feel the floor underfoot start to seem more solid at night. Marianne noticed changes in herself. 2. At appointments, she now asked follow-up questions and listened to the quiet unease in her own chest instead of smoothing it over. If someone dismissed her worry too quickly, she thought of that night on the couch and pushed once more. She had watched what stubborn loyalty looked like in a scarred animal who refused to doubt what he sensed. It made her less willing to doubt her own instincts, especially where her grandson was concerned. Around town, the stray who once haunted dumpsters at the edge of things became something different. Kids on bikes called his name. Men coming off late shifts nodded to the porch where he dozed beside Owen, as if acknowledging a fellow worker on an endless watch. And every night, as lamps clicked off one by one on Maple Street, a striped figure settled into his chosen hollow by a pair of small, now safer legs, making sure that in this little corner of the world, nobody slept quite as alone as they had before. By the time another spring rolled over the hills, the bruises on Owen's legs came less often and faded quickly when they did. Daffodils pushed up along the cracked walk, and warm air drifted through the open windows. On the familiar brown couch, afternoon light spread over a scene that had finally become ordinary. A boy, a little taller now, feet in clean socks, and the old striped watcher curled along his shins, one paw draped like a claim and a promise together. The family left the crooked photo on the wall, exactly as it had hung the night everything changed. Beside it, Marianne added a new picture. Owen, in rumpled striped pajamas, leaning into his guardian on that same couch, the striped body pressed to his legs, eyes turned toward a blurred figure in the doorway. Just above the sock line, the faint shadow of a healing bruise peeked out a reminder of how close they had come to a very different ending. At the library, when other grandparents asked about the illness they'd heard whispers of, Marianne told them about specialists and treatment plans. But she always ended with the same simple truth. What really saved him was someone refusing to ignore what they saw. Shed say, and an old shelter stray who wouldn't leave his side. Sometimes Shed show them the picture, and the room would go quiet in that particular way, shared by people who know how fragile a life can be. Evenings remained her favourite. The sun slipped low, painting the living room in gold and shadow. Owen and his guardian settled into their usual hollow, the boy's hand absently kneading thick fur while he chatted about trucks and trains. Silver had started to frost the stripes around the nicked ear, but the eyes behind them stayed clear and watchful. In her chair across the room, Marianne wrapped her hands around a cooling mug and let gratitude sit heavy and warm in her chest. She knew there would be other hard seasons. No story stayed gentle forever. But when the house creaked at night or a soft thump sounded in the hall, she no longer reached for the light in a panic. Instead, she pictured that striped body stretched across a doorway or curled along a pair of small legs, ear bent, always listening. "I'm glad you found us," she would murmur into the quiet, more to herself than to him. We're not alone anymore. Not ever again. If this story touched your heart, drop a simple 1 in the comments to let us know you were here. Your support keeps these gentle stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might just be the one that finds you when you least expect it.